Hello. Today we are going to discuss about cultural theories, and within cultural theories we are going to focus on mass and popular culture. So before we move on to understanding what mass and popular culture actually is, we need to actually focus our attention to how culture has influenced society. Though culture is something which is very important and intrinsic part of our society, our daily lives, but before theorists actually thought about this particular aspect, culture did not actually find that kind of a place in the daily lives, in the theoretical aspects and all. It was mainly due to the emergence of Frankfurt School and other cultural theorists who actually began to study more about culture and society. So, why do we need culture? Basically, societies, in order to reproduce and in order to survive, they depend a lot upon culture, because culture cultivates attitudes and behaviors in the minds of the people, and it predisposes people to consent to established ways of thought and conduct which is already there in society. And also media and consumer culture in particular, they engage people in practices which integrate them into the established society. So the narratives which are offered by the media, it helps the people to find pleasure, to understand how the society works, the norms, the decorums of the society to some extent, of course. And the texts which are offered by the media, the audience's response to this text is varied. It keeps on changing from one individual to other, depending on the level of socialization, the way the culture, the way the societal norms has influenced that particular individual. So that is also another important aspect of culture. It actually influences the audiences in varied and different ways, not in similar ways, because audiences are active recipients of the different kinds of images, texts offered by the media. So that's why it is very necessary for us to understand our cultural environment if we want to control our lives, and here actually cultural theories play a very important part. In order to understand popular culture within cultural theories, we need to actually look into how the idea of mass culture grew up. During the 1920s and 1930s, this was a time when actually there was a huge level of rise of mass culture. It actually became evident that media is having an effect on the lives of the people, and it was at this particular time that different researchers and theorists started to research on this particular aspect of media, how media is actually creating an effect in the minds of the people, what is the effect, the level of effect, and all those stuff. In order to look at the rise of mass culture, we need to look at the rise of mass media. And because, as I said, popular culture is very much related to mass media, any form of mass media, whether radio, television, even print, what we see is theories like Lowenthal, they linked it to the rise of market economy in the 16th and the 17th century. They thought that market economy has led to the rise of mass media, and that in turn has created an impact in the minds of the people. And later on, we also see that Burke, another theorist, he suggested that actually the rise of mass culture is related to the development of national consciousness of the 18th century. In looking into the debates of mass culture, three related themes which actually can be found in determining what popular culture is and how it is related to mass culture. So the first concerns what or who determines popular culture. Now, where does this popular culture actually come from? Does it emerge from the people themselves as an autonomous expression of their interests and modes of experience, or is it something which is imposed by those who have the position, who have a special position in the society? That is one particular concern area. The second concern area is how the influence of commercialization and industrialization actually has created an impact on popular culture. So the question which emerges is that the Thus, the emergence of culture in commodity forms mean that criteria of profitability and marketability take precedence over quality, artistry, integrity, or different kinds of intellectual challenges that actually should be associated with culture. And the next concern area is whether there is an ideological role which the popular culture plays. Like, the question is basically, is popular culture there to indoctrinate the people, to get them to accept and adhere to ideas and values which ensure continued dominance of those in most privileged positions in the society and who exercise power over the mass of the people? Or is it about rebellion and opposition to the prevailing social order? That is another concern area. So three particular questions were raised at that particular point of time, which we need to understand in order to understand popular culture and mass culture. So the 1920s and 1930s, as we see, is the significant turning point in understanding studying popular culture. Basically, the coming of cinema, the coming of radio, and the coming of mass production and consumption systems actually created an impact at that particular point of time in influencing people and making them aware of their needs, their understandings, the way of living, and offering them something of that particular sort to influence them totally. So the very fact that culture came to be almost infinitely reproducible due to the development of techniques of industrial production actually posed a considerable number of problems and questions regarding the role of culture in that particular society. So apart from popular press, cinema and radio, which were arguably the first kinds of modern mass media to emerge, it fueled fears of commercialization of culture, which is something which was feared by people, that if there is commercialization of culture, then it is going to affect people in a negative kind of way. So we will talk more about that, but one example can be given that this kind of potential was also marked by the deliberate and conscious attempt by the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s to offer official Nazi ideology in all areas of culture and art, and eradicate any kind of alternative political and aesthetic ideologies which should have emerged at that point of time. So their aim was to enlist the help of intellectuals, writers, novelists in propagating their own cultural idea. Mainly it was used to propagate a particular kind of propaganda kind of material, so repressing the other kind of ideas. Now moving on to understanding mass culture and mass society. Basically, it is claimed that industrialization and urbanization had a disruptive kind of consequences on culture, because what they did is they actually made people divided people into various categories, and what they did is they actually focused more on the popular kind of culture without focusing on some other kinds of art forms. So it led to the phenomena called atomization. Now atomization, basically mass society which consists of people who can only relate to each other like atoms in a physical or chemical compound. So mass society basically consists of atomized people who lack any kind of meaningful or moral coherent relationships with one another. They have purely contractual and distant relationships with their peer group and with other people, and there is a kind of decline of mediating social organization like the village, the family, the church, which actually at one point of time provided a psychological identity, social conduct and moral certainty for an individual. Also, not only are the contacts between the people purely formal and contractual, but they lack any kind of a deeper sense of moral integrity, since moral order is something which is totally on decline in a mass society. That has been claimed by various theorists. So without appropriate mediatory organizations, individuals are kind of vulnerable to any kind of manipulation and exploitation by the core institutions, which is something which is controlled by the people who have the money, who have the resources, who have the power, or in short we can say the capitalists. So basically, people in mass society are atomized both socially and morally. Also, democracy and education is seen by some theories as harmful developments in this kind of a scenario. As some people say that democracy means that everyone is entitled to full political citizenship, and that potentially everyone's general cultural preferences are valuable and worthy of being respected and fulfilled as those of traditional elites. Furthermore, so there are the ability to write, read, and discriminate. This is something which is very much related to democracy, and some people also, some theories basically also think that the extension of political citizenship rights, so the expansion of this trend in culture combined with the effects of universal elementary education is sometimes seen to be the result in popular determination of mass culture in mass societies. So theories of mass society and mass culture usually rely upon a clear division between the past and the present. They actually most of the theories say that the masses actually lack taste and discrimination, and culture is considered to be something which is debased and trivialized, and it is believed that the culture which was there in the past, when the society had this unitary, was in a unitary whole, there were different institutions in the society where people used to work together. That point of time the culture was much more good, and at this point of time there is a lack in having a proper coherent proper kind of a culture where people can actually think about themselves. But basically the culture is something which is mostly in the hands of the people, the elite people, mainly capitalist society. In a capitalist society, culture is thought to be something which actually kind of brings a homogenization of the materials which are being given to the people, so that the people are happy with the basic materials which are provided by some groups of businessmen, so that they can't think more about it. They are happy with whatever they are getting, and on the other hand, the people who are in power, the capitalists, basically they gain benefits from them, getting advertisements and other revenue formats by selling these cultural products to the people who are actually enjoying those cultural products, which is popular culture mainly. So democracy and education, many theorists have claimed they entail the breakdown of cultural distinctions between art and folk culture on the one hand and mass culture on the other. In the same way, urbanization and industrialization entail the breakdown of traditions of community and morality. So we move now to the mass culture debate. The mass culture debate basically refers to popular culture which is produced by the industrial techniques of mass production and marketed for profit to a mass public of consumers. So culture is now thought about something which will be able to make money, mainly money for the people who have or who own the cultural products, who actually bring it to the forefront to the masses as a whole. So mass production industries and mass markets are encourage the spread of mass culture. The main determinant of mass culture is mainly profit. That is something which we should remember. It is profit mainly for the production and marketing, and it kind of influences the people also, because this is something which is dominant, and it has been made dominant by the mass media and by the other people, by via different kinds of advertisements and via different kinds of debates and talks held about a particular product which is a cultural product. So from this point of view, there is no difference between actually material and cultural products, between say the production of cars and production of films, as say. So because everything is kind of standardized, the regular way in which factory production is done. But one has to remember that art, for example, cannot be produced in this particular way. The alleged aesthetic complexity, creativity, experiments and intellectual challenges of art cannot be something which can be achieved by the techniques or conditions which produce mass culture. So art is something which is very different. It cannot be standardized. It has its own kind of technique thought process, meanings associated with it, and it cannot be compared by to the production of cars per se. So mainly in this particular kind of mass society, audiences are considered to be passive consumers, because they are one who form the mass. The mass, basically unidentified group of people who actually are not sometimes that educated enough to understand each and every aspect of high art per se, as said by the theorists. So the picture is of mass of people which, almost without thinking or reflecting, accepts mass culture and mass consumption, and the nature of this audience therefore means that culture can be profitably mass produced. That is the take which the theorists have taken. So the bland and standardized formulas of mass culture are something which influences the audiences. Mass culture is therefore a culture basically which lacks intellectual challenge and stimulation, providing instead the undemanding ease of fantasy and escapism. So people actually don't think about the real problems anymore. People basically are satisfied with the thing which is being offered by the cultural products, basically which actually are helping them to escape from their daily problems, which is not bringing them and making them think, but which is saying them everything in a very easy format, which makes them to escape. So this is not actually which culture should do. So mass culture is a threat because it's a homogeneous culture, and it influences people in a huge manner because it actually do not produce any kind of alternative viewpoints. So moving on, we need to understand that it is a culture which discourages the effort of thinking and creates its own emotional and sentimental responses. Now we basically move on to a particular kind of thought called commodity fetishism. Now commodity fetishism is something which is related to Marxist theory of commodity fetishism, that in a mass culture society, in a society which is dominated by mass media, mainly what happens is that cultural forms such as popular music and popular films, they can actually secure the continuing economic, political and ideological domination of capitalism. Now commodity fetishism is something where actually you forget about the real needs. You actually find a product very interesting enough and you want to have that particular product, and after gaining that product also you will not be satisfied and you will again go on to buy another new product, which you kind of think will satisfy yourself. This is something which actually capitalism does in a society because it wants to sell its product. Now we need to understand what Frankfurt School had done. Frankfurt School, basically a school established in 1923 in Germany. This particular school had done a great deal of research regarding different aspects of culture. So at this particular school actually had many kind of theorists who had talked about different kinds of needs which are called false needs, particular needs which people don't have but which are produced by the people who actually create the cultural products. So basically we move on to understand what culture industry is. This is a concept which has been developed mainly by Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno of the Frankfurt School. So the culture industry reflects the consolidation of commodity fetishism, as already discussed, the domination of exchange value and ascendancy of state monopoly capitalism. In 1991, Adorno distinguished the culture industry from the mass culture, since the latter idea assumes the masses bear some responsibility for the culture they consume. In this kind of a scenario in culture industry, basically there is a standardization as well as pseudo individualization, as Adorno stresses. Basically standardization can be equivalent to homogenization. There is a standard kind of a product, and Theodor Adorno has given the example of popular music, where popular music has this same kind of thing. Even if you exchange a particular para or a particular kind of music with another music, you will see that there is no big change as such. But if you consider avant-garde music or other kinds of classical music, you will see that each and every part of that particular music is something which produces something new, and which cannot be, which is not interchangeable. So to ignore the nature of culture industry, as Adorno defines it, is to succumb to its ideology. Now power lies within the culture industry, and that's why the commodities produced by the culture industry are governed by their need to realize their value on the market. So only those cultures survive which has value in the market, which can be sold as a commodity. Any particular culture which is not saleable, or which has particular kind of thinking mechanisms associated with it, those particular culture will not find a place in this kind of a society. Those culture will be relegated to the background, like the folk culture or avant-garde art, those kind of things, high art, as the theories have claimed. So there is a kind of regression of listening, as Adorno points out. Regression of listening, basically people love to hear this kind of music, popular music, basically because they kind of can forget about forget about their real life scenario and enjoy the music without thinking much about what is going to happen in their society, what problems they are going to face. So cultural phenomena as a popular music act as a kind of social cement in just helping the people to understand that this is the way actually the entertainment forms are are presented to you, so that you can just enjoy it without thinking about it too much. But the cultural theories wanted some kind of a change, where other kind of art should come to the forefront and make an impact in the society. Now coming to the conclusion, what we can say is that many people have claimed that mass culture theory is a kind of an elitist kind of a theory, which actually gives more prominence to high art rather than thinking about the other kinds of popular culture prevalent in society. It takes a kind of elitist stand. Many theorists have said that popular culture is not homogeneous or standardized, but it offers diversity and difference, especially when it is reinterpreted and reevaluated outside its original context. This is also one kind of notion which has been put forward by some other critical theorists. Also, it has been claimed that the theory overestimates the past and gives and underestimates the present. It kinds of looks into a negative aspect of culture. This has been also one of the point where these theories are negated. Also, few attempts to substantiate the claims put forward empirically is something which has not been made. These claims have not been actually put forward empirically. These are something which are qualitatively put forward. So this is one more point. And also the concept of standardization is something which needs to be looked into more properly by using empirical evidences. This again has been the claim of other theories. But overall we can say that of course culture makes an important impact in our society, and so culture is something which actually can influence the people in a lot of different ways, and so it needs to be studied in a proper context and proper scenario in a capitalist society.